Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the situation in the South Donetsk direction. As you can see, we have lots of icons, lots of changes on the ground. According to different mappers, the Russians managed to establish complete control over the industrial zone of the coal mine of the South Donbas number 1. The Russians established complete control over the in the landfill that located to the north of the industrial area. So this information is confirmed either both by neutral mappers and pro-Russian mappers. According to their maps, the territory was captured by the Russians. But as for the pro-Ukrainian sources, they confirmed that the Russian control just over the industrial area, and according to pro-Ukrainian sources, the Russians still haven't managed to take under control the landfill, the Terikon of the South Donbas coal mine number 1. So now let's talk about the geolocations. Probably they will give us additional updates and additional understanding of the situation. Just yesterday we were talking about this video. In this video we can see how the Russians were bombing the high-rise constructions in the central part of the industrial zone, trying to force the Ukrainians to fall back, trying to destroy the Ukrainian communication equipment, probably machine gun positions, maybe sniper positions. And today we got another video a little bit further in the northeastern direction, and in this video we can see two Russian soldiers that were raising the flag in the most northern part of the industrial zone of the South Donbas coal mine number 1. Of course, this video is enough to change the color of the territory in Russian favor, but obviously this video is not enough to change the color over the landfill of the South Donbas coal mine number 1. So we are talking about this territory. So we are going to keep the area as is until we get additional clarifications or additional videos that can change the map. Now let's talk about the southern stronghold once again. According to neutral mappers, this territory was captured by the Russians, but as for the geolocations, we still continue receiving videos of how the Russians were FPV droning Ukrainians on the territory of this area, which confirms that most likely there are still Ukrainian soldiers on the territory of this stronghold. So maybe the Russians have already forced the Ukrainians to fall back by the time we start making the video, but let's wait for additional updates. Now let's move further in direction of Vodiane. We got a lot of geolocations from this area as well. According to different mappers, this territory was captured a long time ago by Russian forces. This information was confirmed by pro-Ukrainian mappers, by neutral mappers, and by pro-Russian mappers. But as for the geolocations, just today we got the video. In this video we can see a Russian soldier who was raising the flag in the central part of the village, and this video is enough to change the color over the territory of the northern part of the village, so over this part that located to the north of this industrial zone. We still haven't received anything that can confirm Russian control over this lake, over this residential part of Vodiane, and over this industrial zone. So we have no doubts that these territories were captured by the Russians during the previous phase of the South Donbas offensive operation, but let's wait for additional updates to change the map in Russian favor. Anyway, summarizing everything, we can make a conclusion that the next target of the Russians is to move further in the direction of the South Donbas coal mine number 3, and if the Russians are able to take under control this territory, then we can start counting days when the Ukrainians will be forced to fall back from Ugledar towards the village of Bogayavlenka. Anyway, we can make a conclusion that the front line in this area has already been collapsed and the Russians has already defeated the Ukrainians. It's just a matter of time, a matter of days, and a matter of price that the Russians are going to pay for a complete defeat of armored forces of Ukraine. Now let's move further. Let's talk about Georgievka-Kurachovo direction. The Ukrainian sources published the video of how they were repelling another Russian attack from Marinka towards the fields between Kurachovo and the village of Katerinovka, Antonovka, and Konstantinovka. The Russians were using significant number of armored vehicles. The Ukrainians shown us a lot of episodes of how they managed to track, to hunt, and to destroy, ambush, sometimes even ambush Russian vehicles. Anyway, the Russians managed to improve their positions, and some of the episodes were geolocated, and one of the episodes was geolocated exactly in this point, which confirms additional Russian progress in the western direction. So we have just colored the tree line under complete Russian control. Now let's move further, and now let's talk about the city of Krasnogorovka. Most likely the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation will provide us additional updates about the city today. They will confirm that the Russians established complete control over the city. In this video that was published yesterday in the evening, we can see the Russian motor Son of Anarchy that was moving from the eastern part, from the central part of Krasnogorovka in the most western part of the city, and in the most western part of the city, a Russian soldier also raised the flag. This video is 100% proof that the Russians managed to establish complete control not just over the central, northern, south and eastern, but also over the most western part of the stronghold. This is obviously a significant victory for the Russian forces, and I believe that in 2022 nobody expects that the Russians are able to take such a stronghold so fast and without dealing significant damage to the city itself. Basically, the city was damaged, but telling the truth, it's like something tells me that maybe in a year, when the front line moves much further in the western direction, people will be able to return back to their homes. Anyway, the Russians established complete control over the Krasnogorovka, and currently the Russians created something like first steps, first signs of another cauldron for the armored forces of Ukraine that are currently located in these fields between the city of Krasnogorovka itself, Marinka, Georgievka, so in this area. Currently, we don't know for sure the exact number of the Ukrainians who are currently located here, but most likely the Ukrainians will not wait for additional order from their commanders to retreat. Most likely during the next 24-48 hours, the Ukrainians will begin withdrawing forces. They will withdraw their positions towards more reliable territories. Now let's move in the northern direction, and today we got a very important statement from neutral mapper, and according to information we have, the Russians crossed the river, crossed the water reservoir, and began clashes for the territory of farms that located to the northwest of the city of Krasnogorovka. So there are very heavy clashes exactly for this territory, and we can say that the Russians began the final stage of the creation of Cauldron for the Ukrainian forces that are currently located in these fields. If the Russians are able to take under control the farms and to improve their positions as deep as possible, then the Ukrainians have no chances for safe evacuation, and the soldiers, Ukrainian soldiers that are currently located in this area, will be encircled completely. So once again, nobody knows for sure the exact number of Ukrainians that are currently located in the fields. Maybe we're talking about a few thousand soldiers, maybe we're talking about just a few hundred soldiers, maybe we're just talking about a few tens of soldiers. Because anyway, despite the fact that we are not receiving anything from these fields, obviously the Ukrainians slowly, step by step, trying to make the process centralized, they're removing forces from the line of combat contact in direction of the villages Zhelane Druge, Zaryane, Girnik, and Vovchenka, Kurachovka, and many other different settlements that located in this part of the front line. As for Ukrainsk and Girnik, during the previous few days we've been receiving lots of updates about the Russian attempts to enter both cities, but yet we haven't received anything that can confirm additional Russian progress. Maybe today we're going to receive additional updates, so let's wait, because the battles for these two town cities are very important. Now let's talk about Selido. We have additional changes on the ground. The Ukrainian sources published the video of how they were withdrawing the edge Russian positions in the southeastern part of Selidova. In this video we can see a number of Ukrainian FPV drone attacks on the Russian positions, and based on this video we have adjusted this small black in Russian favor. Also we got another video from this part of Selidova, it's already Selidova, of how the Ukrainians were withdrawing the Russians, but currently we have some doubts whether we need to change this part of Selidova in Russian favor or not. Maybe this video is archived before the Ukraine attempts to counterattack the western part of Mikhailovka. So let's wait for additional updates. If we receive more, let's say, confirmations, then we will color this territory in Russian favor. Now let's talk about Novogrodovka. If you remember, during the previous day we were talking a lot about another death road that the Russians created to the west of Novogrodovka, and we made a projection that due to the fact that currently the Russians established complete control over the roads over the village of Lisovka to the south of Pokros, that means that the Russians most likely are going to move exactly in this direction. So this is Russian pattern, this is Russian new tactics. Once again, just for your best understanding, first the Russians are sending drones as deep as possible on the territory of Ukraine, not so like hundreds of kilometers, but probably 3 till 5 kilometers from the line of combat contact, and then they start moving exactly in the same direction where the Russian drones are flying. And for example, today we discussed these several strikes, and today we got report from different mappers that the Russians, as a result of offensive operation, managed to secure and to establish complete control over the territory to the west of Novogrodovka. And the Russians took under control these three lines and this one, and most likely the Russians are going to move further, and most likely they are planning to enter the Lisovka from the southeastern direction, so from this part. And as soon as the Russians are able to do this, they will begin moving further in the northwestern direction with the purpose to cut M30 road that connects the city of Pokrovsk and the city of Selidova. If the Russians are able to cut the road, then Ukrainians will suffer significant problems with their logistic on the territory of this city. Now let's move further and let's talk about Toretsk-New York agglomeration. Was a very interesting case was happened during the previous 24 hours. The Russian sources published the video and they began spreading information all over the entire internet, saying that the Russians managed to raise the flag in the heart of the industrial zone of New York, that they managed to take under control these plants and these different these territories. So this is Phenolny plant, but later the building was geolocated, and this is the territory where the Russians raised the flag, and which video the Russians were using as a main evidence that the industrial zone was captured by the Russians. So for now, no changes on the ground, but some pro-Russian sources have adjusted their maps in Russian favor due to the fake video. Now let's move further and let's talk about Chasiv Yar. We have additional changes on the ground. The Russians managed to improve their positions in the city of Kalinovka. The Ukrainian sources published the video of how they were bombing and attacking the edge Russian positions in this part of the village. So we see that the Russians slowly but step by step are moving forward in the western direction with the purpose to get as close as possible to the highest hill in this area. And as for the highest point in this direction, we're talking about this coal mine. So this is the highest point, and this is the highest point not just between the northern Chasiv Yar and Kalinovo itself. This is the highest point for this entire direction, and who controls this point basically controls the city of Chasiv Yar. Now let's move further. We have additional updates. More precisely, we have confirmations that confirm additional Russian progress between Zaliznianska and the village of Minkovka. We have adjusted this map in Russian favor a long time ago, but just today we got geolocation that confirms Russian progress. Based on this video, we will adjust the map in Russian favor before the next video. In this video, we can see how the Ukrainians were bombing the edge Russian positions. Now let's move further and let's talk about the Kupiansk direction. According to information we have, the Russians managed to establish complete control over the village by the name of Makeyevka, over the part of the village that located on the Russian side of Zheribets River. In this video, we can see the Ukrainian drone that was FPV droning the Russian soldiers on the ground, and based on this video, we have adjusted the map in Russian favor. So the Russians are moving. We have additional reports that the Russians crossed the river, and that the Russians still don't have strong positions on the Ukrainian side, but they're continuing developing this process. Now let's move further to the Kursk direction. During the previous 24 hours, we have additional videos of how the Russians were bombing and attacking the Ukrainian edge positions in this direction. So now let's talk about a few more important statements, few more important articles that were published by the Western media. More and more Western politicals, more and more Western important people start talking about the end of the conflict. Just yesterday, the Chancellor of Germany, Olaf Scholz, reported that it's time to start negotiation and it's time to finish the war in Ukraine. But today, Zelensky himself, Ukraine rejects Scholz's peace offer, and which means that Ukrainians are not going to stop the special military operation. We understand with Zelensky, he understands that if war stops, he will be removed from his position and somebody else will become a president of Ukraine, and currently he is not going to give his power. Furthermore, more and more Western countries, more and more Western articles are about the possible war between NATO and Russia. But the thing is that according to the Bloomberg and according according to different media, NATO countries are afraid of nuclear war. But the thing is that the Russians are not going to nuke NATO directly, and according to Western countries, Russia is going to make an explosion in the space. So cause for concern, the grim scenario of Russian nuclear strike in space. At NATO headquarters, concern is growing about a Russian nuclear attack in space. According to US findings, Moscow has launched several killer satellites into space that can be equipped with nuclear weapons. If they were used, they would send out waves of electromagnetic pulses with devastating consequences. So as you can see, Russia have found a solution how to stop NATO, how to stop the United States of America, because as I understand, currently nobody afraid of nuclear war on the earth, but everybody are afraid of nuclear war in the space, and the Russians have already found a solution how to do this. Furthermore, as I said, the Russians in the 21st century is first in many equations like hypersonic missiles, and now the Russians are the first who can destroy the entire satellites of Earth just with one or few explosions. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.